I'm Anne-Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hot Flash Inc.
You're all woman to me. All right, Anne-Marie.
Anyone who listens to the Hot Flash 8 podcast will know I've had a hard time finding help with my perimenopause and menopause symptoms, whether it was trouble sleeping or extreme anxiety or vagina stuff. I've encountered roadblock after roadblock in doctors who didn't know anything about taking care of women like me. It made everything harder than it had to be. That's why I'm so happy that there are companies like MIDI Health stepping into the gap and sponsoring podcasts like this one. Their supportive, comprehensive, and holistic approach to the menopause transition will provide you with what we all need most, a personalized care plan. Their virtual care clinic is easy to use and covered by most insurance plans. You can chat with your specialist during an appointment or message 24/7. You don't have to deal with this alone any longer. Book your visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. It's just amazing to speak to you. I tried to interview both of you when your book came out in 2022, the book that I absolutely adored. And I've done giveaways just on my own. Like, just if I'm in a mood, I'll say, do this and I'll send you a copy. And nothing happened. And I was I was busy and I probably didn't try as hard as I could have. And then I thought, oh, well, I'll talk to them eventually. And I just think it's really special because I know Louise, who works with you, was the one who reached out. But I lost my father in February and I put my platform on hold because it was, sudden and and I had already put it on hold to take a break, partly because of the amazing sort of wisdom that you imparted in your book. And I realized that I needed just a break to retool and reboot and rest a bit. And then my father died. And the reason I'm telling you this is I was thinking, I don't know if I can come back to this because this is really hit me really hard. And I had a couple of things that happened that made me think I want to come back. One of them was I got a sponsor for the podcast, MIDI Health, which I'm really excited about. And then I got an email from Louise saying that you would want to come on or suggesting you two for the podcast. And I just thought, oh my gosh, like they were like, boo, boo, like that. And I just thought, okay, like, come on, I can't turn down a sponsor and I can't turn down these two. So I think it's like kind of, yeah, like I'm back at it. I don't know if I would be.
Well, you can blame you can blame us all the way.
Right.
Like, bastard women. You just
yeah. That break never really happened, by the way. So that's still got to come. But anyway, I'm so happy to speak to you, and I'm nervous to just do this book justice because I devoured it and I'm going to read it again. It came at just the right time. I feel like it's the book every woman needs to read. It's the counterbalance to this conversation. So I'm worried about not doing all of this justice or asking you questions that are like, Anne-Marie, how can we possibly explain that to you? That's, an entire book worth. But I guess you're good at this and you'll do your best.
yeah. It's an occupational hazard.
Yeah. One thing that's guaranteed is that we won't have enough time to say all the things we want to say.
Right.
But
we can't talk for 4 hours. This is not Joe.
Any conversation is a good conversation. And honestly, just having the platform and the space to share this with you and have your listeners listen is a real gift to us, so we're very, very grateful. So however it goes, Anne-Marie, it's good for us.
I think the fact that it's so meaningful for you is really good as well. It's like you're inside the material. It's the material is it's real for you. You're working the material, you know the inside story. So that makes it really juicy, I think, heartwarming as well.
And I think other women must be getting so much from coming across you in all the places that you've been, because it's just such a counterweight. And when you're becoming, we'll talk about this, your inner knowing, but it's always felt like there's so much more to this than what we're told in a lot of spaces. And so to just have someone tell you that, just to have, people who have walked with so many women confirm your beliefs, it's amazing. So I hope everyone who listens gets that. Okay. So first of all, the reaction to Wise Power, can you sort of frame that for me? Because it's been 2 years now, I guess, that you've been talking about it.
It has been, well, we've only heard good stuff, basically. We don't know. But it is, I mean, we get such beautiful emails from people about basically how it saved their life. Because this feeling of it's all over, and, you know, this thing of dying, I mean, they use that word. And that this has opened up a, you know, they're alive now. They're alive now. And it's also sort of coupled with doing a course, Great Awakener course as well. But it is this feeling of relief and, oh, I knew there was something more. And also that the book is a kind of medicine in itself. They feel sort of, the book travels with them through menopause. And we often hear, oh yeah, people giving away copies, like you're giving away copies. It's like, oh, you have to read this, you have to read this, you know. So there's a lovely word of mouth thing happening. And because we take a very strong position, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, you do.
We're bold. We're bold.
You were bold. Shani, how about you?
Hearing what you say, Alexandra, there's something I'm very grateful is that we wrote the book when we did, which was not our plan. We had other plans, but the publishers said to us, either you write a book on menopause or we'll get someone else to write a book on menopause. Which we're like,
that gets us going.
Yeah, no one else. And I'm so glad for that push to do it, because when our book came out and around the time it came out, there was such a surge in this conversation around menopause. And because menopause is showing up as such a disaster for so many people, because it feels like death, and because there was such a health crisis happening around it, such a physical health crisis, but also a mental and emotional health crisis that's happening around it. The conversation that quickly dominated was one about menopause as a problem that needs to be fixed. And I'm so grateful our book has come out, as you say, Anne-Marie, as a counterweight, because really we're bringing in a much deeper truth, which is that, you know, this isn't a design flaw. This isn't a problem. Yes, there's this huge fallout happening for so many people going through menopause, but it's because we've been disconnected from our bodies and from our cyclical nature and from our menstrual cycle and all that inherent education that would have happened had we all been taught cycle awareness when we came into our menstruating years, and had we all been practicing it, and had we all felt this natural graduation into menopause, and had all the embodied knowing that it takes to traverse this huge physiological, emotional, spiritual transition. So, you know, there is a huge recovery to do, but I'm very glad that our book came out when it did, because I would have been sitting in my bedroom crying if the only conversation out there was one of the, you know, the problems of menopause. Because all of the dignity and power of what's actually happening here would just get subsumed in that conversation. And the fallout of that would be tragic, truly tragic.
Lest anyone be getting sad or angry that they didn't have cycle awareness, and I think many women my age didn't, you know, we just didn't. We just, you know, you powered through, you were told to power through in whatever you read. Don't be sad, because I was getting sad as I was reading. And then you told me that I could do it retrospectively with the moon. And I'm still working on that, because it's hard. But anyway, I just want to point that out. That can you just explain a little bit about that? Because if someone had been aware of their cycle, and you figure it out in your 40s when your cycle is already changing, like what do you do then? And then how do you use the moon?
It's a really, really good question. I actually just want to add another piece here, because there is the retrospective work of recovering some embodied knowing that was lost, but also, even if you come to this knowing when you reach menopause, menopause itself is remedy. If you can go through menopause with awareness and with the context that we share in our book, if we can understand really the deeper processes at work, menopause is a process of recovery in and of itself. And menopause does put us back inside this embodied knowing and back inside this cyclical, a deep trust in cyclical life. You know, there's nothing like navigating the death, the end of a cycle consciously, to really restore your faith in cycles and in life being an ever unfolding cyclical phenomena. So there's also that. And that's really, our book is for people who don't have cycle awareness, as well as those who have had the miraculous privilege of having it. So yeah, I think that's another piece.
I just want to really emphasize actually what Shani has just said then, and also to add that grieve, because let yourself have the grief, because actually it'll open the door to something. It'll take you inside yourself, and it'll take you into a greater tenderness and intimacy with yourself. And so in a way, it can be the doorway in to everything Shani has said there around menopause being its own kind of cosmos, if you like, that's going to hold you. And that if you, follow the guidelines, the instructions within our book, as much as you can, you're going to feel the sort of intelligence, the logos of menopause at work, the spirit of menopause at work within you. So it's so interesting, this thing of cyclical consciousness and having missed out on it. And I think once you are in menopause, in a way, I think the dominant note is you just surrender to the dynamic of what we articulate in the book, and just work with that, work with the instructions we give you. And you can, at this point, also, if you want to, just pace the cycle of the moon. But I don't push that for those who are in menopause. I just say it may help you, but it may be information that's just too much right now. And but it can be very helpful coming out of menopause, the other side. So I always, now as a postmenopausal woman, I always pay attention to where I am in the moon cycle. And it is a pale, how can I say, it's a very, it's just an echo of my experience of my menstruating years. But it is nonetheless has a distinctness to it, just pacing that energy of, emptiness, the dark moon, which of course is equivalent to menstruation, and I can feel the stillness of the dark moon and the ecstasy of it, which is what I used to experience when I bled. I used to feel so freaking ecstatic, and I get a hit of that around that. And then, just as I did with the menstrual cycle, I have to really pace myself in the days after the new moon, because I can feel this rising energy again. And I'm a bit like a newborn foal whose legs aren't very sturdy. And if I go galloping off, I'm going to have trouble. And so I really consciously pace that expansion up to full moon. And I don't do it in a very obsessive, detailed way. I just, I will note days, but it's the days I most note are around full moon, because I can get very high then too. But also the days coming into the dark moon, and they're the most distinct for me. And it's a way for me to manage my energies on a day-to-day basis. Actually, it's very, very practical
Yeah. One of the things that cycle awareness teaches us, which is so simple but so profound, is how to rest in a rhythmic way that makes our lives sustainable. So, menstruation is that time of pause and letting go. And I think when it comes to those who haven't had cycle awareness, a very simple thing to know is just that menopause in and of itself is that pause, is that time to rest, just in a much greater cycle, in the cycle of your menstruating years. So overall, we're needing much more rest and retreat and respite throughout menopause. And when we say menopause, by the way, we're talking about a multi-year psycho-spiritual transition, not just the day when you haven't bled for a year. There's a much bigger process around that. So we're talking about a few years of innerness and restedness and backing up from all the pushing that we've done for most of our lives, and all the out there-ness and the driving and the stuff of our menstruating years. So if you are in menopause, the moon is just a lovely little reminder when it's dark moon. Oh, okay, rest. But you can have those reminders anytime, you daily rest, weekend rest, nighttime rest, but it's about more rest. And the moon, when you're in menopause, can just be that little sort of nudge that says, okay, we're back to the dark moon. Have you taken a couple, 2-3 days off here to really retreat and let go?
Did you know I also have a Substack? That's just a fancy way of saying I have a newsletter. But listen, it's not like every other newsletter. I am the only journalist in the world who's made menopause my beat. And each week I share research, news, products, tips, and tricks from the world of menopause and midlife. Sometimes I even write an essay. Hot Flash Inc. on Substack is where I pull together everything that's here and in the manosphere, and I break it down just for you, so that we can try and make sense of it all and figure out what to do together in real time. Join more than 5,000 women practitioners, CEOs, and more, and become a subscriber today. You can get my podcast as well as special video and audio drops you can't get anywhere else. Sign up today at hotflashinc.substack. You mentioned something, the big question is, why are women having such a hard time? And of course, we know some people are saying, well, women didn't go through menopause because women used to die at 50 and menopause is only 100 years old, which is one of the narratives that makes no sense when you look at history. But I hear that still all the time from people who should definitely know better. Then you have people saying, smart people saying, why is this? Well, there's a health crisis, there's an environmental onslaught, and the conversation kind of gets focused on that kind of thing. But you mentioned the disconnect. And there's a very popular influencer who just made a video saying women are dead inside when they're in 40. She's a big proponent of taking testosterone and whatever. And maybe you need some hormone therapy to sort of zhuzh you up so you can make this transition. But you spoke to the disconnect. Whatever happened, we are entering this completely disconnected. Can you speak to that when you're talking to people around the world and teaching? How is this making it? Is this the missing piece that's part of the reason everyone's suffering so much?
Yes. And Shani alluded to it earlier when she spoke about, the missing piece of menstrual cycle awareness. So at its fundamental level, menstrual cycle awareness is the art of and practice of pacing your energy and your nervous system. It's about pacing your actual capacity and respecting this rhythm of on and off, if you like, which is the nature of all cycles. So it's a real respect for cyclical life. And we all know how shitty we feel when we haven't had a good night's sleep, and that's the circadian rhythm that we honor by sleeping at night and then being active in the day. So it's the same principle at work with the menstrual cycle. And the menstrual cycle, when you're actually practicing cycle awareness, you're actually connected to yourself each day. It's like a checking in with yourself and with your needs, with what your actual energy is, and making choices from that place. So menstrual cycle awareness builds actually self-confidence and capacity to assert boundaries, and to know what your needs are and care for them. So can you really hear the connection that's at work there, Anne-Marie? It's really basic, very grounded work. And I mean, there's so much more that's going on with menstrual cycle awareness, but at this foundational level, it is this fundamental connection to how you're feeling, what your energy is like, the state of your nervous system. So it's like a self-care practice in and of itself. And so I think the reason that people are crashing and burning so much is because we have not been pacing ourselves. It's an act of pacing yourself, cycle awareness. We push ourselves, and we push ourselves to perform to meet the standards of what our culture or society or times expect of us. And they are inhuman, can I say, actually. And everyone is crashing and burning also. It's not like, we have a huge mental health crisis. Well, I'm talking about the UK, but I'd say it's, well, in Western first world places, it's huge mental health and exhaustion. And of course, we're exhausting the planet as well. It's on all levels, this extractive consciousness, this pushing and taking and not honoring the organic nature of our being sufficiently. And so the other important aspect of the menstrual cycle is that it's a feedback system. It's giving you feedback. So when you're practicing cycle awareness, and the great feedback moment is premenstrually, premenstrual syndrome is feedback moment. If you can listen to that, it's telling you about the state of your health, your energy, your nervous system even more. And if you can listen to that and take appropriate action, you are supporting and nourishing your health ongoingly. So yes, then you come into your 40s. And yes, there is a change in the 40s. You're getting older, folks. You're getting older. And we come into our 40s imagining we can still do what we did in our 20s and 30s. And I'm going to hand it over to Shani now, because Shani is in her 40s and has gone through this. And it's textbook stuff.
It's so good listening to how you describe that, Alexandra, because when we look at rhythms, for example, the day-night rhythm, we know that what we do during the day, we can get away with a lot because the days are designed for the use of energy and awakeness. But if we keep going through the night in the way that we have been during the day, that's when we get the feedback. So at night, then you start to feel irritable, your immune system lowers, you can't focus anymore, you get brain fog, all the things happen when you aren't honoring that second half of the cycle. In the day-night rhythm, that's the night time. And the same is true really through our menstruating years. The earlier part of our menstruating years, our 20s and 30s, are more like the day. We talk about them as being the inner spring and inner summer of our menstruating years. But then you come to your 40s, and now you're coming into the evening or the inner autumn of your menstruating years. And that is where the feedback starts to come. So you are starting to notice the life you've lived thus far and the accumulation of stress and all the underlying health issues, emotional issues, all the stuff that hasn't been tended to and cared for starts to come up for review and for your attention. So we absolutely do change in our 40s, and actually it gets much harder to stay connected to ourselves in our 40s because we're so used to that doing energy, and requires a whole different kind of way of being. We have to we have to change. Like, I'm somebody who used to be really, really full on, like, go, go, go. And I am having to discover myself as somebody who does less, who has less capacity, who can't push in the same way, because when I do, I really, really feel it. The fallout is big. So this is what I'm noticing in my 40s is I can't get away with things like I used to. And it's harder to connect with myself because there's a lot more going on. I'm feeling things more deeply. I get more stressed easily. And when we're stressed, we disconnect and so on. So it is definitely harder, but cycle awareness is the constant returning home. So even if your cycles are changing in your 40s, if you keep paying attention, you keep that connection to yourself and you stay in a cycle of well-being. And that means when you come to menopause, you aren't at the end of your tether. You know, you aren't completely overwhelmed and your nervous system isn't completely shot and your adrenals aren't totally exhausted and so on. Yeah, there's something left in the tank, which is really important.
I just really want to emphasize something now, Shani. You know, you are, yes, you have to be so much more boundaried and you are fierce about your self-care in the way you never were. But the thing I want to draw out here now is that your authority, you know, your inner strength is huge. And you know, you are immensely productive. It's I mean, I don't think you've ever been more creative or more
That
productive.
is very true. And this is what yeah, people in the premenstruum can relate to this. So I'm much more effective and much more potent. I do less, but what I do, I really do. And that's because I'm more aligned than I was when I was younger. I know my business more, and I'm also much more discerning. I only do what it is I really, really matters to me. So yeah, that's one of the great gifts of the 40s.
Yeah, a real sense of power and mastery is growing. And I think that's really important to name here. It's very, very juicy.
Juicy. And you talk in the book about, you know, for a while you are dying, you feel like you're dying. And Alexandra, you talk about being less present in your reality. And this is a potent time because it's not just about our hormones. It's obviously a midlife crisis, a hero's journey. There's all that stuff going on of where I've been, am I happy about it, where I'm going, I'm gonna die. I realized maybe in a way I haven't realized before. And if you feel like you're dying, you're trying to do all that while you're going through the hormonal changes. And what I see all the time is women just trying to get back, almost doubling down instead of listening, right? Like I know I did. I know I doubled down and tried to do the exact thing. I didn't know even about perimenopause, but I tried to double down and exercise more and do more and do the hard things. Do. Do you see this in people? What do you tell them? Because is that the first reaction a lot of the time?
I'm just thinking how when anything changes in our lives, when anything shifts, our first reaction is, how can I hold on to what was? I think that's just a very normal, actually, I want to say healthy, like egoic response, because there's something in our psyches that just feels much safer in what we've known. And when things start to change, we're coming into an unknown. We don't know ourselves. We've changed. We don't know who we are. And there is this cultural expectation for us to be a certain way. Like we don't have a culture that says, oh, yes, you know, in your 40s, you're going into the inner autumn of your life. It makes complete sense that you would start to pare down and get more discerning and begin to change gear. That makes sense because at menopause, in the inner winter of your life, you're going to be coming to a stop. So you want to start, preparing the nest and beginning to make changes. We don't have that, and we don't have role models of that. So it truly is the unknown because there's no cultural context for it. And I think it's a very normal response to think, okay, like, how can I save myself? How can I maintain the status quo? And we go to the things we've always known that work. Doing more generally gets praised and validated. Trying harder is something that's always been celebrated in our culture. Better exercise, all those things are what we return to. And we don't have the tools that are needed to navigate this different context because it requires different things. It's a different time, and we need different tools. We need different modes of operating. So yeah, I think that's very, very normal and very much to be expected. And if that's all we know, we're going to run into the crisis, which so many are, burnout, major health issues. Perimenopause is really only known for the symptoms. That's when people talk about perimenopause, they mean how many symptoms are you suffering from? And actually, this shouldn't be a time of symptoms. That's not. It's not. What's the word? I'm trying to say it's not necessary, but it's not par for the course. It's the fallout of not respecting the gear change.
Exactly, not adjusting yourself. That's it. And once again, I really want to emphasize, this is not a weakness. I want to say it again. This is not a weakness. This is you getting older and you needing to do things differently. And as you feel that change, as Shani said, you want to double down on what you know. It's an existential crisis moment, of recognizing, yikes, I'm getting older. What's it all about? Who am I? And it's really, and to meet those questions in yourself, because it's pretty classic when you step into your 40s, around say 42 or something like that, you suddenly feel the kind of change within you. It doesn't mean you're in menopause. God, no, your 40s are sacrosanct. I want to keep the 40s as this very, very potent time of coming into mastery. And you're asked to adjust and really come into, well, who am I really? Because a lot of the time we're doing performance stuff to meet what the world thinks we should be doing. And that's really depleting us. And in your 40s, you're really beginning to feel that more, well, what am I really about? And you're going to get that question big time when you get to menopause. So you want to do your homework now, folks, to set yourself up well for menopause, because it's not going to feel good otherwise. But you start to, just as Shani said, become more discerning and more aware of your boundaries, more aware of your needs. And don't see it as a weakness. I'm saying it again. See it as a refining process. Coming in alignment with yourself. And then you start to feel this growing sense of clarity and inner strength growing. It's a new kind of strength emerging. And you still have energy in the tank, folks. You still have, you've got it. You just haven't got what you had when you were 20, which is, I look back to that time and Shani go, I do.
Well, no, I really want to pick up this piece. It's so good. I've not heard you be so emphatic about it, Alexandra, but it's true, because this is perceived as we're falling apart. It's weak. We're becoming more irrelevant in society and not capable and so on. And what's actually really going on is that we are waking up to power. And it's a power that the world doesn't understand, actually. It's a very particular kind of power that is rooted in our own authority. Because in our younger years, we really project our power onto other people. We see something else as being the standard de facto, what it should be. There are all these shoulds that we try to aspire to. But oh boy, here in your 40s and in menopause, you are now coming back to yourself being the gold standard. It's you start to go, oh, it's all in me. And there's this recognition of yourself. And when Alexandra talks about this alignment that starts to happen in your 40s, it's because you stop playing to other people's agendas and societal agendas. And that's why people get so pissed off with older women, because we don't care as much and we're not willing to play the game and be nice and do what's going to make you feel good. We're much more interested in getting on our own side and living our lives and doing what we know will make us feel good, and ultimately, therefore, being able to serve and give something to the world, Yeah, so this is power waking up in us.
Do you have any theories about where that's coming from? Because what surprises me, and I know this has been going on for decades, but it's coming from other women my age, portraying it as this and portraying often one answer or one solution, usually in the form of hormone therapy. This platform, I really balance it all from mainstream to functional medicine. I take no opinions other than a few narratives that I reject outright, that this is a deficiency or a disease. But it feels like it's coming from somewhere. It feels like there's a fear of that power. And sometimes I think the women who are promoting that narrative, I don't know what they're going through, but collectively they're going through something. And I don't know. Do you have any opinions about any of this?
The bit that got me was when you said, do you think there's a fear of this power? I thought, oh, yes. Yeah.
Because you're going to cause trouble. You're going to upset the apple cart, seriously. I want to really paste something here from what you're speaking, Anne-Marie. I want to just really acknowledge all those people who really are suffering horribly, and still have to go to work, still have to put food on the table for their children, and they're not sleeping at night. I almost feel like I want to cry saying all this, and yet they're still supposed, they're expected to turn up and perform like they were 20-year-olds again, still at work. And it's also, of course, you're going through an inner death about your whole identity. And you'll be comparing yourself to all the younger people who don't have that going on, and so are so innocent and think they're the freaking bee's knees. And they should feel that, by the way. I want them to feel like they're the bee's knees. But you now are going through a serious inner workout and to find your true power and authority. So, but you've got to die to the old first, and you're in a place of not feeling great about yourself because of that, and because there's no language around this, what they're going through, no affirming, dignifying language, which is what we're trying to give. So you're feeling awful, and you've got to go out there and work every day. And so I just really want to acknowledge that. And in my book, my feelings about, for instance, all the hormonal stuff is I am very happy. I'm very grateful that modern medicine exists for the emergencies. I had need of it myself last year when I got sepsis. And did I argue with the antibiotics? No, I did not argue. I said, yeah, give them to me. I want to stay alive. So, but it is a Band-Aid. It's not, and, they're important and useful, but it's, so I do want to just name that. And what people are experiencing, what women are experiencing, is this crisis of the menstrual cycle itself never having been valued, of cyclical life not being valued, that we only honor one gear in this culture, which is, top gear, keeping going at all costs. And it's destroying everything, our psyches, the soil, the earth, everything. It's and menopause is a massive feedback moment on the state of the nation, actually, on the state of the planet. I feel so strongly about this, that it isn't just the state of my health, but it's the state of our world. And so, but there's little old you not sleeping at night, and you still got to go to work next day. Frankly, you couldn't care about the state of the world. You just want to get to work next day and feel okay. Give me those hormones. But how great if there was a bigger conversation going on in which, yes, the hormones are there, and yes, you may be taking them, but you're also aware you're feeling dignified within a larger conversation, which is what our work is trying to do, which is what our book is about. And if you can be held in that larger conversation and held in communities that hold that larger conversation. So, for instance, our menopause course, Menopause, the Great Awakener, which we run every year in November online. And you can come back. You only pay once. You can come back year after year. So you can travel through your menopause doing our course again and again. And you're held in this, and you're fed this message of spiritual awakening. You are awakening to yourself. And all that you're suffering, the crap you feel, has a meaning in that process of awakening to yourself. And so our work, our approach, gives meaning to the difficulties, the emotional difficulties that you're confronting within yourself, and that is dignified. And the moment it is dignified, you can start to feel differently. You can start to feel seen. You can start to feel validated. That is medicine, Anne-Marie. This is absolutely profound, foundational medicine. And you can make different choices from that place. You start to get, you get much sharper about what you're going to do and not do. You still give thanks if you're taking your hormones, you give thanks for them, but you don't abandon all the other things that are so important to be doing. A lot that we talk about in the book, and we're talking about the psychospiritual stuff, but also there's lots of really good practical health information, natural health information that is core to building well-being and to supporting you through menopause. And you're setting yourself up for post-menopause life perfectly.
You've been through it, Alexandra. You're going through it, Shani. What are some of your sort of top tips for people to help this?
Yeah. So if we look at menopause itself, so we said menopause is an inner winter. I think it's very helpful just to think of it as a life stage or phase that is a season of one's life. So that's really important, is to give it just a context of it being a phase, which it is, because as you know, when we're in a phase, it almost always feels like this is the new normal and it's going to be like this forever. We so quickly go into that, like, oh, this is who I am now. This is how it's going to always be. I'm never going to be able to like function again, or whatever the case might be. So it's really helpful to remind yourself that you are in a life stage, you're in a season of your life, and different seasons of our lives need different things. So the inner winter of our lives, nature is such a beautiful guide and mirror for what's needed at menopause, because menopause is a pause, as the name suggests. It's a separation from the life you've lived, and it's a space, a time between times where you get to step out of the momentum and review, take stock, reconnect, replenish, come back to contemplation within yourself, and to kind of kindle your connection with your true self, and to sort of find a new resting in yourself before you then step into there's a whole nother cycle post-menopause. You know, there's the second spring is your post-menopause life, and then it's followed by a summer, and then, you know, Alexandra's still rocking it somewhere in the autumn, or yeah, probably in the autumn of your post-menopause life, Alexandra?
Yeah.
So yeah, so looking to nature, I think, is a really good guide for that. Alexandra, what are the tips you want to add?
Yeah. I want to I want you to know the menopause is on your side. It's not the enemy. And the big tip I want to give you is listen to what's coming up in you and do not dismiss it as mad. You may not be able to act on things straight away, but just honor the thoughts you have, because the closer you get to menopause, you are going to just notice things. You're going to be suddenly finding yourself thinking things, wanting to do things. You'll probably find you want to say no to an awful lot of stuff, but you don't know what to replace it with yet, you know, but you just go, nah, that's over. And you may even think that about the current job you are doing and going, no, this job, I'm done with it. But of course, you still have to go to work because you need an income and you don't know what else to do yet. But don't dismiss the thought because you don't know what you're going to do. Just honor the thought. Just honor the thoughts that come and just pace them. And now the critical thing here is, more than anything else, along with just honoring what's coming up, is you need more time and space for yourself. That is bottom line. So just really hear me on this. You need more time and space for yourself, and you need to get ruthless about this. But conveniently, there's a very particular power, I just mentioned it, that gets unleashed at menopause, which is the power of no. You will actually find yourself saying no, as I've just said. You'll just go, no. And people will think you're negative, by the way. You're not. You just don't know what else you want yet. You just know. It's boundaries. You're saying yes to yourself when you say no. You're putting a boundary in the place. And people aren't going to like it, by the way, just letting you know, because they have to change. It's not just you that changes. Because you're changing the dynamic of the people around you, your family. Your children you're not going to be there for your children in the same way. They're not going to like that because they're going to have to grow up. Your partner, they've got to renegotiate the relationship with you. And, you know, there are conversations there. This is normal. This is healthy. Nothing is going wrong. So really remember that. You are changing the dynamic of the people around you. And no one likes having the dance steps changed. And when they're changed, we stand on each other's feet. But when you recognize that the nature of transitions, you're aware of it. You go, yeah, this is part of the course. I always have this, I've got this lovely story that I love telling. An Italian woman. She'd been a classic Italian mama, you know, there for children, doing everything. And she suddenly wanted to go back to work again. She was a speech therapist or something, I can't remember. She got this job in this town for, you know, required a car ride. And in the car, she had time and space for herself. But she started having all these thoughts. And one day she had the thought, things have to be different at home. You know, it's such a dangerous thought that you get really dangerous thoughts at menopause. She thought things have got to be different. And she had a dignity to herself. She basically came home and said to her family, her husband and her two daughters, she said, things have to be different. She had a meeting around the kitchen table and she said, I am not going to be there for you in the way I used to be. And the daughters were squirming and they were saying, Dad, can't you put something in a tea? Because Dad happened to be a doctor. And, you know, because of course they were going to have to change. And I love this story, one, because of, you know, things are going to be different, but it was her dignity with herself. And I think when you have time and space for yourself, You have the thoughts, but you also have space to feel your rising dignity with it, to assert that.
And when you talk about relationships, I mean, when you start changing like this, you lose some friendships. It's
You do.
really painful. I lost a very close friendship with my honesty. And I've experienced it in my family where when you realize where you haven't been truthful and you're scared of being truthful and you are truthful and maybe it doesn't go well, can you just talk a little bit about how to help women through that? That is, for me, that's been very painful.
Wow. You know, we can't control everything, Anne-Marie. And the thing is, the more conscious you are about what you're going through, and the more space and spaciousness and pacing you can bring to it, the more present you're going to be. And I think it's when we don't understand, we'll be much more reactive, and then we'll get much more reaction back. So I think some relationships may not last the course, but they may end in a way that feels better. And they may not end at all. I mean, I'm now thinking of another story. It's actually in our book, Wise Power, of a woman who she said to her husband one day, you know, well, basically, I don't want to go on as before, and I don't know what the future holds, something to that effect. And she went off and did a lot of therapy. And, you know, she didn't know the answer, and her husband was left hanging. He did not know the answer. She did a lot of inner work, and I think they did some work together in the end, and they are still together. And you see, I think she did that with immense respect for him, but honesty. And this is where the partner has to grow up. And they have to hold their own emotions and feelings. And he had to obviously do his inner work. He could have just reacted and, you know, and not owned his side of things. And it's a testament to their relationship, actually. And in a way, you're testing I'm talking here about our partners, our husbands, our wives. You're testing the strength of the relationship, because on the other side of menopause, you're going to want a different relationship. You are going to ask a different quality of connection, a different quality of intimacy, and you can't go on as before. So actually, the relationship will need to go through a workout. Mm. And I also want to acknowledge the other side. You know, both sides. You know, I want to care for both sides here, and you know, there's no pass or fail here. It's, you know, it's the rigors of being a human being and all our different needs, but, you know, get support. But the more you can pace, the more awareness you have of what you're going through, I think the better you will handle the kind of fierce energy that's coming up in you, and use it more wisely. And then sometimes you don't, because that's the nature of menopause.
Yeah. And, you know, again, it's just really good to remember that menopause is an ending. And, you know, we sometimes talk about it as the great house clean, because it is about really coming back to what is absolutely it for you. And that's true in relationships as well. So no matter how well you handle it, sometimes a relationship, a friendship is just over because it is not it anymore. And there's just, you know, that's why grief is such a big part of menopause, because there's a lot of ending, a lot of letting go, and therefore a lot of grief. It's part of the nature of menopause. Yeah.
You write really gently about the topic of suicide and how some women haven't made it. And this is spoken about in the media a lot, because this time of life, I think the suicide rates are highest for men and women, still grossly more for men. But can you just speak to that a little bit? How you decided to address it and how you've you've seen it and experienced it?
Yeah. My heart. We know women who took their lives, so it's very close to the bone, this one. I know of and know. There's a lot to say. Menopause, oh gosh, I feel tears welling about this. It's just such a tragedy. So I'm going to speak to the very big picture, actually, I think, which is the fact that we do not understand psychologically and spiritually what's happening at menopause, and we are not sufficiently resourced, both physically but emotionally, to meet that challenge, because menopause is a psychological death and rebirth. It's a death of the ego, and that it's very easy to say those words, but to feel that death of the ego in one's own being is shocking. And then this whole conversation is held within a culture that does not value older women. And there's this idea that you're falling off a cliff at menopause into irrelevancy. And to our souls, that is profoundly shocking. Profoundly shocking to feel you are irrelevant. We all need to feel we are meaningful. And at menopause, what you're doing is you're really going through a workout to find, what am I about? What is the meaning of my life? And finding where your true authority, your true power lies. It's huge. And as you meet it in the way that we frame it and hold it, man, it is total liberation. But to get to that liberation, you have to face, we call it betrayal, actually, that first phase, that death moment, because it feels like life betrays you. All the promise you had of your life, and you suddenly realizing, oh my God, I'm not going to realize this, or I'm not, because for some who want children who've never had them, this is it, of course, it's the end. But because you're getting older, there's a sense of, oh, I'm never going to make it with my life, and do something meaningful. Well, all the achievements I've made in my life have come post-menopause, truly. I am fulfilling something that I'd been holding all through my, before I came to menopause. My life did not amount to much. And all I could say is thank God for cycle awareness, because my cycle kept rooting me in. Each month when I bled, I got reminded I was okay. I was okay. That's a whole separate conversation. People should read our book, Wild Genie.
Wild Power.
Wild Power. Wild Genie was my first book. Sorry. Wild Power. Too many wilds here. It's getting wild here. Wild Power. And then, of course, Wise Power is the menopause book. So I was being reminded every time I bled, I dropped into menstruation. I would go, oh yeah, I know there is something at work. I could feel my genius. I could feel my calling. So by my late 40s, I had a sense of being inside something. So when I came to meet that ego death moment, and it is painful, oh my God, you're confronted by your shadow side. And if you haven't been able to do your inner work before at all, and if you've got wounding in your system, real, historical trauma that you have not been able supported in, had the resources to attend to, you get the fallout of that in a very huge way. And it feels like that death feels like the end, and that there is no future. And it feels literally like the end. And if there's no support around you, if there's no one seeing you, what we need in this world is post-menopause women who hold this space and go, I see you, I hold you. Yes, you are dying, and you've got to really face this, because as you face it, you're going to grow up. I can't save you from this. You know, I have to say this, I can't save you, but I witness you. I witness you, and I dignify what's happening. And I want to see you resourced, and I want to support you to have the resources you need so you can meet this cut, this ending. And when you're held in that, you come through it. But when you are exhausted, if there's adrenal exhaustion in the system, massive. If you have been living very outside yourself for too long, that will hit you. And if you have no understanding of the psychological and spiritual story of menopause, if you're not supported, if you're alone and lonely, it can be very easy to just, at that point, take that cut very literally. It's a no to the egoic forces, because you're being opened up to spiritual forces and to the deep self in you. But if you're not aware of that picture, if you've had no taste or preparation for it, then that no feels like the end.
Annie, do you have anything to add to that?
It's just
Pretty good.
very, hearing you say all that. Wow.
Okay, I have two more questions. One is kind of big, but I feel like the world is waking up to sort of the corruption and fakery that's happening in the structures that we always believed in. You know, I call myself a recovering journalist because I don't really believe in my craft anymore, except how I learned to do it, but I don't see a lot of it out there. Financial planning, government, like, you know, where do you want to look? Things just aren't what we thought they were. And at the same time, we're having this surge of information about the quantum world and consciousness, and how science is sort of affirming that we're part of something larger, and we came from it and we go to it, and it's right there. And people are talking about jumping timelines and all sorts of things. And people are going through menopause and perimenopause during this. So I just want to ask you, do you have any idea what I'm talking about? And is this torquing things up a bit, do you think?
Shani, I think you should respond to this, but I'm going to say something.
I love it.
I'm fascinated by what you're asking. Do you think you can ask it in a slightly different way? I want to follow the thread of this.
Well, we're all going through, you know, say I'm going through menopause, I've gone through it, and people are in perimenopause, and you have this internal chaos, but you have the outer chaos of the world. But at the same time, you're moving into this place of inner knowing and the ability to say no and have boundaries and discernment. And the world, the scientific community, is providing us with evidence that that is real. Yes. And that the things that we've been told are woo-woo are actually backed up in science.
Yes.
And that, you know, so I just find this two sides of it. I actually started out to just talk about the corruption side of it. And then when we were talking, I got the idea for the sort of quantum consciousness side of it. But I'm feeling all of that at once. A tremendous sort of betrayal in the world, and also this beautiful assurance in what it actually is. And so I just wondered if I'm crazy or what you're that illuminate anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a lot running through my system now as I take that in. So what Alexandra said about the cycles within cycles that the world is going through, you know, or I would say humanity is going through a big initiation. I mean, COVID was such a piercing, interrupting moment, much like menstruation and menopause come along and interrupt the momentum and create a big gear shift that causes people to review their life and what's going on in such a strong way. I mean, COVID was really a menstrual menopause moment, and that initiation is continuing. I'm with you, we really are at the kind of pointy end of something in humanity. And what you said there about the simultaneous chaos, corruption, projection of power, abuse, and all of the fallout that's happening, alongside renaissance, like revelation, awakening, people being able to see more clearly, and discoveries happening, that makes complete sense to me in terms of what I know about cyclical life. So I'll talk about the menstrual cycle experience because that's what I'm living in my 40s. The moment before bleeding, which is mirrored, by the way, in the menopause experience, is really we sometimes call this space, we call it the void, and Alexandra mentioned this word betrayal, but it really holds this quality of heaven and hell within it. And that's so much of what the power of initiation is about. It is facing death in order that we might awaken and expand and really see beyond what we have seen before. And I feel that is what's happening in the world. You know, the revelations that are happening in science that are helping us to, in very tangible ways, recognize that we are interconnected, have really, I believe, been born out of this incredible suffering of separation that we've all been in. The suffering has what's almost birthed this need to know, this need to see, this need to realize that we are all inextricably linked, and that we all affect each other. And that happens at a very subtle level. You know, our thoughts affect the environment around us, and so on and so forth. So yes, I mean, I think you've hit on something really important, and it's kind of the application of cyclical wisdom when we want to look at world circumstances. It's very interesting.
So I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to ask you one more question. How should we be defining menopause then? How do you define it in a way that's different from the definition we know?
I might start with something quite practical, because the medical system has co-opted the definition of menopause, and I feel that really doesn't do justice to the experience. So menopause is defined as when you have stopped bleeding for 1 year. So it's defined as a moment. And I think the first thing that is important to recover is that menopause isn't a moment, it is a transition. It is a stage and a phase that happens for anywhere between 2 or 3 to 5 years, something like that. And that starts before the cessation of bleeding and goes on beyond it. And that it is a psychological, emotional process along with the hormonal change that happens. And that then immediately makes sense of the bigger experience that we're all having. And I know, even as I say that, I can kind of feel myself relax, because already now that definition is holding something that's much more true for so many people, rather than that narrow definition. So that's the first thing I would like to become de facto when it comes to the definition of menopause. Alexandra, what would you like to add?
It's interesting. It's a really interesting question. Menopause is the I want to say Okay, I'll just say it's like it's the why am I stalling on this thought?
Maybe I think you know.
Maybe it's
Well, you don't have it. You don't know.
Well, I mean, in a very basic way, it is an initiation into a more expanded consciousness. So it's actually the end of your, I want to say, personal life, the end of it, and it's the beginning of your stepping into this expanded consciousness that is beyond just your personal stuff. So I want to say at menopause, you get over yourself. You just get over yourself at its fundamental level. But it is this stepping into, instead of serving your family and, you know, all that sort of keeping that show on the road, or
the workforce.
Or the workforce, you know, whatever you're doing, you are stepping into this quantum consciousness, if you like. You know, that's what I was thinking when you were talking about this expanded consciousness where you feel yourself held in something greater. And it's about the world. It's not about me anymore. I mean, yes, I have my moments where I go, oh, me, poor little me, you know. But actually, it's like, oh, get over yourself, Poe. So you're not that important. And I am important, you know, in the sense of serving what I've come to serve. So it's menopause is the unleashing of who you truly are.
Love it. Okay, ladies, can you tell us about your course that you were having in November, where you help to sit with people going through menopause?
Yes, our course, Alexandra's mentioned the name, Menopause, the Great Awakener. And if that's not an enticing title, I don't know what is. And in fact, that would be a good definition of menopause, is that it's the Great Awakener. So it's a 6-week online course where we guide people through the 5 phases of the menopause initiation, which we describe in our book, Wise Power, these 5 phases of the psychological and spiritual initiation of menopause. But in the course, we're actually guiding people in an experience to really understand the inner workings of these phases, and we're giving people the tools and the practices that will support them through these phases of menopause. So not only do you get the map, but you also get equipped with the tools to be able to navigate it. And then, as Alexandra said, you get to come back year after year. So one year you might be in the first phase of menopause, which is called betrayal. And then the following year, you might find yourself in the next phase, and a different aspect of the course will become more meaningful and more supportive to you. So you really get to be accompanied through this process as long as it goes on. And there are people who have come for 4 or 5 years, and I want to say they've graduated through menopause and, you know, had their moment of kind of celebrating themselves, really feeling on the other side of it. There's a very strong sense of community. We've got a beautiful team of mentors that support the course, that offer listening circles as well as the live sessions. So you have both the teachings by Alexandra and I in these guided processes, and then you have these beautifully held listening circles. And then this online community space where we just, you know, we cry a lot, don't we, Alexandra? Just reading what people say.
We do.
And honesty and realness, and the way that people on the course accompany each other is just unlike anything else. You know, it is really the place to come if you want to be held in this, you know, new story of menopause, as we like to call it. Really is understanding menopause as a place of power and awakening.
Well, people have a lot of time to think about it, or quite a bit of time. That's coming in November. And I guess follow your social channels and sign up for your newsletter, perhaps, to get all the news and the opportunities.
Yeah, you can sign up for be put on the waiting list, and we'll email you in October. If you go to redschool.net menopause. You can sign up there.
Okay. Well, I can't thank you enough. This has been wonderful for me, and I hope it is for everyone who's listening. I'm sure it will be. It's lovely to connect with you. You're doing amazing work.
Thank you.
I have just so enjoyed this conversation with you. It's felt very satisfying, and I don't know, I felt terrific.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah, I agree. It was such a pleasure. It felt so real and alive and easy to,
Yeah.
to
Well,
share
thank
what we know and love. Thank you very, very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah.
Hot Flash Inc. was created and is hosted by Anne-Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Anne-Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hot Flash Inc. Media.